I found out my parents gave my entire inheritance to my brother and didn't leave me a penny. Sounds like a classic family drama, right? But here's the twist. What if the reason they did this wasn't because they loved him more, or because I'd done something wrong, but because of something I'd never even considered? In the next 60 seconds, I'm going to tell you how discovering this shocking truth turned my world upside down, and why the thing I thought I needed most from my parents ended up being the one thing I could live without. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here, and hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. My name is Sophie and I'm 34 years old. I've always thought of myself as an average person, nothing too flashy, just comfortable. I live in a small, cozy apartment in Chicago, where the hum of the city is always there, but never too overwhelming. I work as a marketing consultant, a job that pays the bills but never makes me feel like I'm changing the world. My life isn't anything extraordinary, but it's good. I've got a circle of close friends who I'd consider more like family than anything else, and a husband, Alex, who's always been my biggest supporter. Life felt simple, predictable, even. Then there's Tim, my older brother. Tim's the one who always seemed to have it all together. He's been married for years, has 2 kids, and lives in a huge house out in the suburbs. He's the type to take charge in any situation, and while we weren't super close, I always thought we understood each other. Growing up, we had the usual sibling rivalry, but deep down, I always assumed that when the time came, we'd share things equally. After all, we were family. But when I found out about the inheritance, everything I thought I knew about my family started to unravel. You know how you think you have the perfect picture of your life? Well, this moment shattered mine, and I was left standing there trying to make sense of it all. It was like someone had handed me a script, and suddenly I was reading lines that weren't even mine. It all started a few months ago when my parents, who had always been in good health, suddenly passed away within weeks of each other. My dad, who'd always been the strong, silent type, had a heart attack that took him quickly. My mom, devastated by the loss, wasn't far behind. At first, it felt like a bad dream. I couldn't process it. They were everything to me, always there for every milestone, every heartbreak, every little victory. But now they were gone just like that. I took the reins, handling the funeral arrangements, talking to family members, and dealing with the overwhelming pile of paperwork. I thought, I'm the daughter. This is what I'm supposed to do. Then came the legal stuff, the will, the estate, the assets. I thought it would be straightforward. My parents had always been careful with their finances, so there should have been no surprises, right? But there was. After the funeral, I sat down with the lawyer to go through the details. I had no idea what to expect, but I sure wasn't expecting what I found. My parents had left everything, the house, the savings, the investments, all of it to Tim. My older brother, Tim, not a single dollar was set aside for me. I was stunned. How could this be? My mind went blank, and for a moment I thought I had misread something. But no, the will was clear. At first, I thought I was just having one of those moments where everything felt off, like when you wake up and think it's Monday but it's actually Thursday. I called Tim, my older brother, thinking maybe he knew something I didn't. We've always had a decent relationship, but we weren't exactly best friends. Still, this felt like something we should talk about. So I dialed his number and braced myself for whatever explanation he might offer. "Hey Tim, it's Sophie. I've been going through the will," I said, trying to sound calm, but my voice was shaky. "Yeah, I know, I've been looking through it too. Kinda hard to stomach, huh?" Tim's voice on the other end was surprisingly level-headed. He'd always been the more get-things-done type, so I expected him to have it all figured out. But his tone didn't reassure me. It felt distant, almost like he was detached from the situation. "I don't know what to say, Tim. They left everything to you, everything." I couldn't believe I was saying it out loud. "Why, I don't get it. They never said anything. We were supposed to split it." There was a long pause before Tim responded, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "I don't know, Soph. They never really talked about this stuff with me. I mean, sure, I've always been the responsible one, but I thought we were doing okay." "Responsible?" I nearly laughed, but it wasn't funny. "You don't even live in the same city. You're the one who got all the vacations, the nice house, the kids, while I'm over here in a 1-bedroom apartment, trying to figure out how to stretch a paycheck, and I get nothing." Tim's voice softened, and there was a rare crack in his usually calm demeanor. "Look, I didn't want this. Believe me, I didn't ask for all this. I tried to talk to them about it, but they just, well, you know how Dad was about these things, old school." He made the decisions and Mom just went along with it. I didn't want to be the one to push them, but now, I'm stuck. I paused, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me. He sounded so resigned, and that made me angry. If Tim didn't want it, why hadn't he told them to do something different? Why hadn't he stepped up? Why was it always him who got the stuff while I got nothing? But then, the real kicker came. "Sophie, there's something you don't know," Tim said, his voice suddenly turning serious. "The will was made a few years ago before Mom's health started to decline. She had dementia. She didn't even know what she was signing half the time." I froze, the words hitting me harder than I expected. "Dementia? They didn't, Tim, why didn't you say anything?" I didn't know how. Dad didn't want anyone to worry, and I didn't want to make it worse. They kept things quiet, it was easier that way. I could feel the weight of the truth settling in. They had been hiding something, and I was the last to know. Mom's condition had been worse than I thought. My parents had made decisions based on circumstances I couldn't have possibly understood. "Well, that's just perfect," I muttered bitterly. "So I'm left holding the bag for their secret while you get all the perks. Great, just great. Sophie, I swear, this isn't how I wanted it. I don't even know what to do with all of this." And there it was, the most unexpected twist of all. My anger was mingled with a strange sense of pity for Tim. He didn't want this burden, but he was the one who was left with it. And I was left empty-handed, still reeling from the fact that I'd been kept in the dark about my own family's troubles. It felt like a slap in the face, and I couldn't decide whether I was more mad at them for not telling me or at myself for not noticing sooner. The night after my conversation with Tim, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying his words, my parents' actions, the injustice of it all. The realization that everything they had was now Tim's hit harder than I expected. I had always imagined that when the time came, we'd share the burden, share the inheritance, like any family would. But now, it felt like I had been erased from the narrative of my own family's history. Alex, my husband, noticed the change in me. He's always been the calm to my storm, the one who pulls me out of my head when I spiral. But even his steady presence wasn't enough to calm the anger boiling inside me. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Alex saw how distracted I was, staring at my plate without eating. "Sophie, talk to me, you've been off lately," he said, setting his fork down. I took a deep breath, trying to hold it together, but the words came out faster than I could control. "Alex, my parents left everything to Tim. The house, the savings, everything. I get nothing. Not a single penny." He paused, looking confused. "What do you mean, nothing?" "They left it all to him," I repeated, frustration spilling over. "I always thought we'd share everything, especially after everything we went through, but no. They gave him everything, and I'm left with nothing." Alex looked at me, his brow furrowed. "Maybe they thought you'd be okay, Sophie. You've always been independent." "Independent?" I laughed bitterly. "Independent doesn't mean forgotten. They didn't even tell me. How am I supposed to accept this? I've been struggling with bills and work while Tim gets to keep it all." I stood up from the table, pacing back and forth. "And now Tim, the guy who never even lives in the same city, gets it all. How is that fair?" Alex sighed, looking frustrated. "I know it's not fair, but I think you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. They must have had their reasons." "Reasons? What, because Tim is stable and I'm not?" My voice cracked, and I hated how vulnerable it sounded. "I've always been the one holding everything together. I've been doing this alone, while Tim gets everything handed to him." "I'm not saying it's right," Alex said softly, "but they probably thought you didn't need it. You've always been the one they could count on." The words hit harder than I expected. "So they left me out because I'm strong enough, because I've always had it together." "Maybe," Alex said, his tone gentle, "but it doesn't change the fact that you've been hurt by this." "I get that." I sank into the chair, feeling the weight of the situation crushing me. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I needed to know why. I had to dig deeper. The next morning, I pored over every document, every letter I could find. And then, buried in a pile of old paperwork, I found it, a letter from my mom. It was handwritten, and as I read it, I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Sophie has always been so strong," my mom wrote. "I know she doesn't need what Tim needs, I know she'll be fine, but Tim, he needs stability, he needs this." I froze, the words echoing in my mind. My mom had believed I didn't need the inheritance because I was strong, independent, and capable. She had made the decision for me, one I never even got to weigh in on. My heart sank. I had been the one who worked hard to prove my independence, and now I was being punished for it. Tim, the needy one, got everything. It felt like a slap in the face. The letter wasn't just about money, it was about the assumption that I was fine, that I could handle everything on my own. My mom's words made me realize how little they really saw me. They thought they were protecting me by leaving me out, but they had left me out of everything that truly mattered. The weight of it all came crashing down. My parents had made their choice, but now I had to decide whether to accept it or to let the bitterness consume me. The next few days felt like a blur. I tried to go about my daily life, but everything felt out of place. I was suffocating in my own thoughts, overwhelmed by the anger and confusion. I couldn't make sense of it all, and the more I thought about it, the more bitter I became. Tim had the house, the savings, the life that seemed to come so easily to him, and I was left wondering where it all went wrong. Alex, my husband, had been quiet about it at first, probably sensing that I wasn't ready to talk. But after a few days of me retreating into myself, he sat me down one evening after dinner. He had that look in his eyes, the one that said he had been waiting for me to bring it up. "Sophie, we need to talk," he said, setting his fork down and looking me square in the eye. I didn't want to talk, not yet, but he was right. "It was time. What's left to say, Alex? You've already given me your 2 cents. "Sophie," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I'm not saying everything's fine. But you've been holding this in for days, you're angry and I get it. But you need to talk about it, you can't keep carrying this by yourself." I sighed, feeling like I was drowning in my own frustration. I can't believe they did this, how could they leave me out? After everything I've done for them, everything I've given. Alex looked at me, his expression softening. "You were always the independent one, maybe they thought you didn't need it. Maybe they thought you were fine." I scoffed, feeling the anger surge again. Fine? If I were so fine, why was I always the one handling the difficult stuff? I've been struggling, Alex. I've been living paycheck to paycheck, trying to keep my life together. But they thought I didn't need anything. They never even asked if I was okay. "I know," he said gently, "but you've always been strong, they saw that in you. Maybe they didn't want to burden you with money when they thought you had everything under control." I wanted to scream. Well, maybe I didn't have everything under control. Maybe I needed something, anything, to feel like I wasn't invisible. But instead, I got nothing. Not a single penny. And Tim, he's the one who never even visits, the one who's always been handed everything. Alex shifted in his seat, clearly trying to remain patient. "You have to understand, Sophie, they made this choice with their own reasons. It's not about you not being enough. They just thought you had it handled." That hit me harder than I expected. "They thought I had it handled," I repeated softly, feeling the sting of it all. "But I didn't have it handled. I've been pretending my whole life that I didn't need anyone, but now I'm stuck with this. With nothing." Alex didn't say anything right away. He just sat there, letting the silence stretch between us. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. "Maybe it's time to let go of this idea that you have to be strong all the time. Maybe it's time to admit that you can't do everything on your own." I shook my head, still angry but a little calmer. "I don't know how to do that. How do I stop being the one everyone relies on?" "Maybe it's time to let someone else help," he said softly. "Maybe it's time to accept that asking for help doesn't make you weak." His words settled in my mind, but I wasn't ready to embrace them just yet. I couldn't just drop the anger I felt, not without answers. I had to know why my parents made the decision they did. I couldn't keep living in this haze of confusion. That afternoon, I dug through old family documents, trying to find some clue as to what was going through their minds. Then I came across something I hadn't expected, a letter from my mom. It was old, tucked between some receipts and insurance papers. The letter was simple, written in shaky handwriting that seemed to reflect my mom's declining health. As I read, my heart sank. She had written about me, about Tim, about how she saw our roles in the family. "Sophie has always been so strong," the letter read. "I know she doesn't need what Tim needs, I know she'll be fine. But Tim, he needs stability, he needs this." I reread the letter several times, the words echoing in my mind. My mom had believed I didn't need the inheritance. She thought I was strong enough to manage on my own, that I would be fine without it. But Tim, he was the one who needed help. He was the one who needed the stability. It was like a punch to the gut. All these years, I had built my life on being the one who could handle everything. But now, in my mom's final moments, she had decided that I didn't need anything. I wasn't sure whether to cry or to scream. I had spent my whole life trying to prove I could stand on my own 2 feet, and now, in her eyes, it seemed that I had become someone who didn't need help, someone who could be left out of the equation. I sat there, the weight of the letter heavy in my hands as the tears finally came. Maybe they had seen me as the strong one, but that didn't mean I didn't need anything. I needed closure. I needed to understand that I wasn't forgot. But all I had now was this letter, a painful reminder that I had never been able to ask for what I needed. And as the tears fell, I realized something. My parents' choices weren't just about money. They were about love, about how they saw me, and how I had spent my life pushing people away, trying to be everything for everyone, all the while missing the one thing I needed the most: the freedom to ask for help. After finding my mom's letter, everything felt clearer but also heavier. She thought I didn't need help, that I was strong enough to handle everything on my own. But now, that strength felt like a curse, one that had distanced me from the love I thought I had in abundance. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. I had always been the dependable one, the one who could handle the tough situations. But now I saw it, they hadn't seen me, not really. I couldn't keep my emotions bottled up anymore. I needed answers, and I needed to confront Tim. I drove to his house the next day, determined to finally get clarity on everything. When I arrived, he was out in the yard, trimming the bushes. He looked like he had it all figured out, the perfect suburban life, kids playing, everything in place. "Hey, Tim," I called, my voice shaky but firm. Tim turned, a bit surprised to see me there. He wiped his brow and walked over to where I stood. "Sophie, what's up?" "I need to talk to you about the inheritance," I said, my words coming out sharper than I intended. Tim sighed, his face tense. "Look, I don't want this either. You think I'm happy with this. You think I wanted to be the one to get everything." I blinked, caught off guard by his words. "Then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you step up?" "I didn't want to upset Mom," he said quietly. "She was already in a fragile state. I couldn't make her change her mind." My frustration only grew. "So you just let her make that decision and I get left out? I was there for them, Tim. I was the one handling everything when they needed me, and now I get nothing." Tim's face softened, his usual defensive posture slipping. "I didn't want this, Sophie, but now I'm stuck with all of it and I'm not sure how to handle it either. You think I'm thrilled about this? I didn't ask for it." I felt a strange mix of anger and sympathy for him. "You didn't ask for it, but you still got it. I didn't even get a chance to fight for what I thought was mine. You think it's easy for me, Tim." We both stood there, the tension thick in the air. Then he exhaled deeply, looking at the ground. "Look, I don't know how to fix this. I didn't want it like this, but it's done now." I let the silence hang for a moment before speaking. "So what now? What do we do with this mess?" Tim finally looked at me, his eyes softening. "I don't know, Sophie, but I don't want this to tear us apart. We need to figure it out together." His words took me by surprise. I had expected this conversation to end with more resentment, more blame, but instead there was something genuine in his voice. It was like the weight of the inheritance had been on both of us, and we were both struggling to hold it together. "We're both stuck in this," I said, finally feeling some sense of understanding. "I don't want to hate you for this, Tim. But it hurts, I feel, left out, forgotten." "I get it," he said softly. "I feel the same way. This isn't what I wanted, but it's where we are now." We both stood there, the words hanging between us. There were no easy solutions, no quick fixes. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone in my frustration. Tim and I had been handed this mess, but maybe, just maybe, we could figure out a way to clean it up. Together. The obstacles were still there, and I knew it would take time to come to terms with everything. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe the real inheritance wasn't money. Maybe it was the understanding that I wasn't the only one carrying the weight of our family's choices. The more I dug into my parents' past, the more confused I became. I had already talked to Tim, and we had made some progress, but I still didn't feel like I had the full picture. I kept telling myself to move on, to focus on what I could control, but the anger was still simmering beneath the surface. My parents had made their decision, and I had been left out. What I didn't realize until I started sifting through old family documents was that this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about how my parents saw me. One rainy afternoon, I was sorting through old family letters in the attic when I came across something that stopped me cold. A letter from my mom, written a few years before she passed. It was buried under a pile of photos, wedged between two old albums. I pulled it out, my hands shaking as I opened it. The handwriting was familiar but shaky, the words a little crooked as though written in a hurry. As I read, the weight of it all began to sink in. My mom's words weren't just about finances. They were about how she saw me and how she saw Tim. "Sophie has always been so strong," the letter began. "She's always been the one who didn't need anything. I know she doesn't want for anything, She's strong, independent, she'll be fine, but Tim has always struggled. He's never been as stable, and I can't bear the thought of him not having something to fall back on." I froze, the words cutting through me like a knife. My mom had seen me as the one who didn't need help. She believed I was strong enough to handle life on my own, and because of that, she had given everything to Tim, her needy child. I felt a mix of anger and sadness rise within me. She didn't see me for who I was in that moment. She saw me through the lens of who I had been, the strong daughter who always had everything under control. But I wasn't that person anymore. I hadn't been for a long time. The letter went on to explain that my mom had made the decision to leave everything to Tim because she believed I could handle life without her support. She thought I didn't need anything from them, that I was fine on my own. And in some ways, she was right. I had always taken care of myself, but I wasn't fine. I was struggling, feeling invisible, and I had been for years. I had convinced myself that I didn't need help, but the truth was, I had never really let anyone see the weight I was carrying. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, holding the letter in my hands, my mind racing. My mom had loved me, of course, but she hadn't seen the real me, the me who was falling apart inside, trying to maintain this facade of strength. She hadn't known how much I needed her, how much I needed to feel seen, to feel like I mattered. As the rain continued to fall outside, I thought back on everything. The way my parents had treated me, the way I had treated myself. I had spent so much time focusing on being strong, on keeping everything together, that I had neglected to ask for the help I needed. And my mom, in her final years, had seen me as the one who didn't need it. She had believed that Tim, with all his struggles, needed it more. I found myself feeling something I hadn't expected. Guilt. Guilt for never letting my parents in, for never allowing them to see the cracks in my armor. They had believed in me so much, thought I was strong enough to face life without them. But I hadn't been. I had been struggling silently, alone. But the real kicker came when I found a second note, this one from my dad. It was tucked inside a folder, just as old and forgotten as the letter from my mom. I almost didn't read it, but something in me urged me to open it. It was short and to the point. "We've always believed Sophie would be fine, she's been independent for so long, but Tim needs this, he needs stability. It's the right thing to do." My dad had agreed with my mom's decision. They had both believed that I didn't need the inheritance. They had seen me as strong, capable, and able to handle life's challenges on my own. They had thought they were doing the right thing by giving everything to Tim, the one who needed help. I sat there, the weight of their words pressing down on me. They hadn't seen me as someone who needed them. And in that moment, I realized something that cut deeper than anything else. My parents had made their decision out of love, but love wasn't just about giving someone everything they needed. Sometimes it was about recognizing that someone else might be struggling even if they didn't show it. For the first time, I understood their decision. It wasn't about favoritism. It wasn't about me being left out. It was about them seeing Tim as someone who needed help, someone who needed stability. And they had given him that. Tears filled my eyes as I sat there, holding the letters in my hands. The inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about a family trying to figure out how to show love, how to care for each other in the ways they thought were best. And I had been so wrapped up in my own pain, my own anger, that I hadn't seen it until now. I had been hurt, yes. But I had also been blind. Blind to the fact that my parents had done this because they thought I was strong enough to carry on without their help. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most painful truth of all. I couldn't change what had happened. The inheritance was gone, but the truth was something I could hold on to. My parents had loved me in their own way, and now it was up to me to learn how to let go of the resentment and find peace. The realization hit me harder than I could have imagined. I had spent so long fighting against what felt like a betrayal, clinging to my hurt and anger, unable to see the bigger picture. My parents had left me out of the inheritance, yes, but they had done so out of love, believing I was strong enough to handle life without their help. And yet, here I was, overwhelmed by feelings of abandonment and resentment. The truth felt like a betrayal in itself. I had always prided myself on being self-sufficient, the one who could handle anything that came my way. But in doing so, I had shut out the people who mattered most, my family. My parents had seen me as someone who didn't need anything, someone who could carry the weight of the world without asking for help. But now I understood that they had never truly seen the struggles I faced. They hadn't seen the cracks in my armor because I had never let them. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the weight of the letter from my mom still heavy in my hands. I realized that my parents had trusted me to handle everything on my own, but in doing so, they had missed the fact that I, too, was vulnerable. They had given everything to Tim, the son they saw as needing stability, and left me with nothing but a facade of strength. But the question now was, how did I move forward? How could I release this pent-up anger, this sense of unfairness, and find a way to heal? It wasn't just about the money or the inheritance anymore. It was about accepting the truth of who I was, who my parents had seen me as, and finding a way to forgive myself for hiding my struggles. The crisis wasn't about what I lost, but about how I had built a life around the idea that I didn't need help, only to discover that perhaps I did. It was time to let go of the bitterness. Time to stop holding on to the pain and start building something new, something where I could accept help and let people in. Time to start healing. As the days passed, I began to feel a shift within myself. The anger that had consumed me for so long started to fade, replaced by something unexpected: clarity. I realized that holding on to my resentment wasn't going to bring me peace. In fact, it was only keeping me stuck in a cycle of bitterness and pain. My parents had made their choices, thinking they were doing what was best for me, even if it wasn't what I would have chosen for myself. They believed I was strong enough to carry on without them. And maybe for a long time I had been, but now I needed to let go of the anger, let go of the idea that I had been wronged. The truth was, I had never given my family the chance to see the real me, the one who sometimes struggled, who sometimes needed support. I had spent so many years pretending to be invincible, afraid to show vulnerability. It was time to change that. I called Tim, and for the first time we talked openly about everything. About our parents, the inheritance, and how we had both felt overlooked in different ways. We agreed to move forward together, not as rivals, but as siblings who both needed healing. We didn't have to agree on everything, but we could find a way to honor our parents' legacy without letting their decisions tear us apart. I took the first step toward healing by accepting that it wasn't about what I had lost, it was about what I could gain. I didn't have to carry the weight of everything alone anymore. It was time to let people in, to accept help when I needed it, and to finally forgive myself for thinking I had to be perfect all the time. In the end, the inheritance wasn't about money. It was about learning to let go of my pride and my need to always be strong. It was about realizing that I didn't have to carry the weight of everything alone. Tim and I, after all these years, finally had an honest conversation about our parents, about how they saw us, and about how we saw ourselves. There was no magic fix, no way to undo the past, but there was a newfound understanding between us. As I sat with Tim, talking about what our parents had left behind, both the material things and the emotional baggage, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about accepting their choices. It was about accepting my own humanity. I didn't have to be perfect. I didn't have to pretend everything was okay. I could ask for help, and I could let go of the resentment. When the conversation ended, I felt lighter. There was still work to do, healing to be done, but I wasn't doing it alone anymore. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. The real inheritance wasn't what my parents left behind. It was the lesson they had unintentionally taught me. That love, in its truest form, is not about giving everything, but about seeing each other for who we truly are, imperfections and all.